Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. It seems that people from all over the world are attending this webinar. Welcome to the Accenture and SecurityBridge webinar on the SAP Security Baseline, Surviving an SAP Audit. Thank you for joining. My name is Tidian de Jong. I'm a Senior Manager in our SAP Risk and Control practice at Accenture, the Netherlands. I have the pleasure to be your host and one of the speakers of the webinar today. Before we move on to the agenda, I would like to give my fellow speakers the opportunity to introduce themselves.
Yeah, hello. Also a very warm welcome from my side. My name is Andreas Kirchner. I'm the cybersecurity lead in Austria. And my core topics are focused on the governance part, also the hardening, as well as the cyber and cloud topics. And I'm also leading the DSAG work group Cloud Security, so the German-speaking user group. And I'm looking forward to the webinar. Over to the next.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Goldi Verma, and I'm based in Warsaw, Poland. In Accenture, I'm leading the SAP security practice in Poland, and I'm also working as a SAP security architect. Happy to have you here and looking forward to the great session. Thank you.
And from my side, my name is Ivan Mans, and I first would like to thank Accenture, Andreas, Tidian, Goldi. Many thanks for having me here today. And I'm currently the CTO at SecurityBridge, and I've been invited to also convert, some of the slideware that we're going to see into software. So, I will be joining the session today to talk about and to actually demonstrate how you can enforce a baseline against your SAP systems.
Okay, thank you. The structure of the webinar is as follows. I will start with a 360-degree overview of SAP security and take you through the top 10 audit findings. Andreas will continue with explaining how you can build a robust SAP security baseline and use it to improve your security posture. Goldi will then give examples of his daily work, including a customer case and a customer journey on SAP security, and SecurityBridge own Ivan Mans will then demonstrate how his platform can automate security baseline testing while ensuring compliance. Before we kick off with this webinar, I would like to introduce some house rules. So this session is recorded, so you can always watch it again, or even in the weekend. If you have any questions, you can raise these questions in the chat area. And we also have reserved some time to answer your questions at the end of the webinar. If you have technical issues, please ask them and we'll try to also answer them immediately. SAP security is a wide topic. When we talked about SAP security 10 to 15 years ago, we were talking about roles and authorizations, user management, Sarbanes-Oxley, IT general controls, and managing the associated risk in SAP. A lot has changed since then. At the top right, it's about identity and access management, basically the access controls. Access controls are controls that ensure that access to data and transactions in SAP is restricted. To log into SAP, a user ID is needed, and to perform activities in SAP, authorizations are needed, which are assigned to users in the form of roles. Segregation of duties, access reviews. Yes, so segregation of duties controls designed to ensure that no one person has complete control over an entire process and that at least two people are needed to complete a critical process step. At the top left, we have grouped the controls and compliance topics such as regulations like SOX, know your customer, but also other control types like configurable controls, think of free-will match, dual control, workflow controls, or data-driven controls are highlighted here. And monitoring these controls via, for example, SOC GRC process control. Historically, the focus of the audit has been on these two boxes. The bottom left is about data protection and privacy, a topic that's increasingly higher on the agenda of organizations. Think about who's allowed to view or process sensitive data, from which location this is allowed, and what are the best solutions to protect the data. Examples of sensitive data are personal data, customer, employee, supplier data, price information, etc. There are several ways to protect this data, either through access controls, configurable controls, parameters, login monitoring, custom code, or through a technique called data masking. And masking is making the data unrecognizable but still usable. When we talk about SAP security today, we really mean security. At the bottom right, we see a large number of security items belonging to this category, such as security patch management, custom code security, vulnerability management, threat detection, and the SAP security baseline. Recently, we have seen an increased focus by auditors on SAP security. And since security is important for any organization, in our view, it's a deserved focus. Top 10. In our annual SAP security survey, we asked some of our customers about their audit observations and recommendations over the past few years. Not everyone, but quite a few customers were open to sharing their audit observations. We have listed the top 10 audit observations on this slide. Many observations will sound familiar to you, and I will highlight a few of them. RFC stands for Remote Function Call. RFC is the standard SAP interface for communication between SAP systems. All RFCs are bidirectional. That means that if an SAP production environment calls development, development will also call the production environment. There are several RFC exploits. It's possible, if the RFC security is not properly set up, to create a user in production from the development system, or even to update master data in production from development. When I started my career, I often misused the RFC misconfiguration to reset my password or those of my colleagues in the production environments. Later, as an internal auditor, one of my biggest observations I reported was an unsecured self-looping RFC in the production environment. This RFC was not secured, and because an incorrect authorization value was accidentally assigned to the standard end user role, literally every user on the production environment could own the system within 2 minutes. Log files logging contain information about the system execution, such as activity, user ID, and date stamp. The quality of these log files in SAP are as strong as the log files available in your SAP system. No more, no less. If the logging is not turned on in the system where you perform critical activities, the log file generated will be empty. If logging is not sufficiently enabled, it will not capture all the updates made in the system. Please test, especially with critical tables, that both the records enters in the tables and changes made in the tables are recorded. It's hard to explain to the auditor that you reviewed the logs or that you reviewed critical audit events if there is no log available. SAP Gateway is a framework used for connecting non-SAP applications to SAP applications. There are 2 gateway security files, the rec info and the sec info, which controls the registration of external programs in the gateway on which operating system commands can be executed. If not properly secured, external or internal attacks can get access to SAP and take over the SAP systems quite easily. The 10K Blaze exploit, for example, is a mixture of the gateway and message server weaknesses. 10K Blaze is publicly available on GitHub and does not exploit new vulnerabilities, but very old vulnerabilities. Critical authorizations. Segregation of duties and sensitive access rules are mainly focused on financial segregation to risk. So basically, you need to make sure that all the financial transaction codes are included in your SAP rulebook. You and I know that if you have access to basis transactions code, you can do almost everything in SAP. For example, the gateway transaction code SMGW is usually missing in most rulebooks. This transaction code is called Gateway Monitor. Don't let the name fool you. It's not only about monitoring, you can even edit the access control list with this transaction code. Please ensure that your rulebook also contains the very critical ITT codes. On password attacks, so I guess everybody has an SAP user, or most of the people have an SAP user and an SAP password. Your password of your user is stored in SAP and transformed so that not everyone can easily guess it. We call this the password hash. Depending on the algorithm used, it's easy or hard to crack the password. You can use programs called John the Ripper or Hashcat to find password. Make sure to use the latest algorithms and protect access to the password hashes. I would like to end with transformation. So many customers have started or will start soon their S/4HANA transformation. Make sure there is an SAP security baseline in place covering all SAP system and components. Ensure that the baseline is aligned with relevant stakeholders before you start testing the baseline. It's quite painful if you have to test functionality again because you forgot to include security in your design. And remember that most security controls can be set up as preventive controls. And S/4HANA transformation is a good opportunity to get rid of many time-consuming manual controls and replace them with automated preventive controls. Andreas, you're next.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. DJ has already mentioned the baseline, but before we are going into the topic of the baseline, let me show you some or give you some examples why a sub-security maturity journey is also very important. So during our daily work, I'm experiencing at many clients that we have different security status situations. And so we have, for example, very low maturity levels. We have also very high maturity levels. We have also something in between. And we also need to be sure that having a secure environment is not something like switching on a switch on or off. No, it is really a journey what you need to go. So you need to start somewhere, you need to know what you do, and then you need to constantly increase your maturity level. So SAP is also saying sometimes get clean, stay clean, go ahead. So also somehow indicating the different levels. And when you're starting with all the sub-security topics, you start at nowhere. And there is nothing existing. Maybe you do some ad hoc activities, nothing is documented, it's pretty unorganized, you don't know who are the stakeholders, to whom to reach out in case of an incident, or what to do in case of an incident. That could be also very difficult. And so you need to start increasing the awareness, you need to define first responsibilities, and then you also need to start documenting. This is very important that you know what you're doing. The next level would be then really trying to implement all these things, so implementing the baseline. And then when you did this, then you can say, okay, let's follow up on it. Let's check all the different settings. Are we compliant? Which kind of events do we have? And of course, in the next maturity level, you also might integrate it to the CM solution. And then you can also go one more step, and maybe at a later point you have also AI, where you're then deriving patterns and trying to implement findings based on the events and so on and so on. And so at the end there would then be the mastery state. But this is really a long journey to go, and you cannot expect that you will achieve this within 2 or 3 months. And so, to be honest, I believe this will take quite a while, so maybe a couple of years. And once you think you've achieved it, then you might start at the beginning, and then you need to constantly improve your security. You need to adapt to all the requirements out there. And when we have a look at all the top 10 security findings from the previous slide, and then we can have a look at the next slide, please. Then we can have a closer look at it. And if we are checking, let's say, the password, then okay, there are findings, but what does the finding tell us? So do we have a too long? Do we have a too short password? Is it unsecure because of what reason? Or we have also user IDs, we have login information, maybe we are missing login information. But on the other side, we need to understand what we would like to log or what we would like to see. And we also need to ensure that the security or all the login information are available once we have an incident. And also governance, critical authorizations, and all the other things, they have something in common. This is a SAP security baseline, which means we really need to define the baseline. And for defining the baseline, we have a lot of different input parameters. But let's first have a look what is a sub-security baseline. So the sub-security baseline is the documented to-be state to ensure secure operation and configuration of a system or environment to meet the company's objective. Okay, and now we have here a nice quote, and at the end, what does this tell us? We have here, for example, on the right side, a few further topics. So we have different requirements. And so we have external requirements, such like the legal regulations, data privacy, for example. We have internal requirements, such like information security policies. Maybe we have also company requirements, company legal requirements. We have also third-party requirements, which could be, let's say, ISO or NIST framework, or maybe also something else. And of course, we have vendor requirements. So the vendor is providing us some details what we should do. But all these things need to somehow consider the company culture. So also here we have the 3 dimensions: people, process, technology, which needs to be considered, because if we have lazy employees, then it might be pretty difficult to implement security controls. And if we have really very interested employees and very eager employees, then it could be really easy to achieve such a maturity level what we would like to have. And of course, all these things what we have need to somehow be completed by a sub-security strategy. So we need to know when would we like to have what is the rough roadmap of it, and so on and so on. And to sum it up, we have also all the concepts which are very important, and all these things can then be boiled down to the sub-security baseline. But when we have a look at the SAP itself, SAP is offering the so-called sub-secure operations map, which you can see on the left side, which is divided in this 5 layers and the 16 blocks. So we have here, for example, the organization, the process, the application system, and environment layer. And then we have, of course, the different blocks below. And this should provide us a 360-degree view on all the security related topics. And this is starting, let's say, from awareness. This is covering authorizations. This is covering single sign-on, secure code, but we have also system hardening, forensics, and so on. So we have a lot of different topics which we need. And if we have defined all these things, then we can really say, okay, we have a nice maturity level. And so I've also indicated it with the small picture in the lower right corner with the green arrow. And this is more or less somewhere in between, and we then need to ensure that this is implemented. So and on top of this, we have the security baseline template, and the sub-security baseline template is providing us about, I guess it's about 60 different controls which should be implemented to ensure a secure operation of the system. And here I had an example for it, or I have an example for it for the different recommendations and how it is structured. So when we have a look at the sub-security baseline template, it is nicely structured in the table of content. So it is starting with the layer, then we have the block, and below the block we have then the control group and the controls itself. And on the right side, we have also an example for the control itself. So it has always an identifier. So it is starting with the requirement identifier, then the technology, and then the control name. And here in this example, we have the audit A, audit settings for ABAP. And here we can really very specific recommendations which should be implemented. So here we have the RSAU enable should have value 1, and we have also the others where we have a clear value, and this means we can clearly measure it. And so we know what we need to measure, and at the end this is the basis for all the further steps. So once we've defined all the controls, so that the B state we know against what we would like to measure, which means in the reporting it's bulletproof. Okay, we need to have parameter value 1. If not, then we are not compliant. And so we can also easily argument, hey, dear folks or dear basis team, please implement it based on our guideline or on our standard, and then you're fine with our compliance. And this is also very important that the people know what to implement. So you need to provide this information to your colleagues so that they can easily reach all this information and can implement it or know what to do. Without providing it, you will never have a nice working and secure configuration in your environment. But on the other side, we have also the SAP classification, and here it's getting tricky because when we have a closer look at SAP baseline templates, we have more than 100 parameters which we need to implement, and then you can easily say, oh my God, there are so many parameters, and it is so difficult to know what should be the first or what should be the next one, and what can I ignore or whatever. And so there is, let's say, a general recommendation. You can do it in a very easy way. Start with the vendor requirements, work off the different criticalities, then going further to the third-party requirements. For example, if you're using SecurityBridge, you can then use this as a next basis and enhance your, let's say, your very first version of the baseline template, and then you can go one step further and enhance the different areas and derive further security controls. Maybe you can derive it on events or whatever. And so you can constantly increase the security maturity time, let's say in the next couple of weeks, next couple of months, and then you're really ready to go with all these things. And at this point, let me hand over to Goldie.
Thank you, Andreas. So as we learned in the previous slides, the audit findings are no longer limited to roles and authorization or user changes or change of comments, but it's really bringing the other aspects of security like missing security parameter, insecure RFCs, then other insecure communication channels, right? We have HTTPS, we have SOAP protocols, and so on. Today, I'm going to present to you a customer case. Here on the left side, you can see a background about the customer. This customer having a big SAP landscape and already started the S/4HANA transformation. And the customer was also struggling with the same things, right? There were reoccurring these non-traditional audit findings, right, related to security parameter and other security aspects, and they were really not sure where to start, because so far they were used to handle something related to authorization, user changes management, and so on, where they were effective, right, and doing really well. But now when we see the shift and the completely new audit findings, then they were really lacking the starting point. And also we noticed that indeed they have tools. In fact, there was a SIM solution at enterprise level, but they were missing the information from the SAP SAP landscape, right? There were no events being pushed to the SIM environment. So how Accenture helped there? So we have been engaged with this customer. We basically go step by step. We started with the Know Your Landscape workshop, and later on we helped them to set up a security roadmap and their organizational specific SAP security baseline. And also we helped them to embed the SAP landscape security event into the SIM. I'm going to show you in the next slide how it looks like, how we do it with the customer. So here you can see the high-level outcome of Know Your Landscape workshop. So in this workshop, we are inviting all the stakeholders who are responsible for managing the SAP landscape, also the business process experts, yeah, because the first step is to know in what all systems you are running or executing your business processes. Yeah, if you are not aware what all systems are in use, then probably you will end up applying no security, right? At least this is the first step. We really want to know, okay, let's sit together, let's see where is your business critical information, what are all those systems are, because in SAP landscape we may have 100 or sometime even 1,000 SIDs, right? But not necessarily all of them we need to secure in a top priority, right? So we sit together with the customer. We sometimes pass the awareness, like Tideyan mentioned about RFC gateway, right? Most of the customers are not aware where is this RFC gateway, right? And we are going into the detail of a BAP infrastructure, how the system look like, the Java system architect, and we bring the awareness to the customer and bring all those crucial aspects and help to prioritize, identify the attack surface, and prioritize which system we are going to work on first. And also we discuss about the different communication channel and security, how the information is being flowed from one system to another, whether it's through HTTP or RFC connection, or you are using other uh, protocols from SAP side. For example, IDOC is also widely used, right? So we are discussing all these communication channels and trying to bring the security aspect for all of this. Last but not least, the SAP BTP. Yeah, so right now I would say every SAP landscape having the BTP as well, and it is still new in the portfolio. Many customers are still struggling how to bring the security into the business technology platform. There also we are bringing the awareness how we can bring the or embed the security on global account, sub account, and underneath services and applications. So here in this slide, as Andreas mentioned, there are a lot of external requirement, internal requirement, and also we have vendor recommendations. Yeah, so we try to develop a process for customer where we help them how to come up with the target SAP security baseline, and then how to monitor it, and basically how you keep this security baseline alive and up to date. So in the first step, we really identify the relevant source security framework, yeah, which is relevant for your business, for your organizations. Yeah, it could be, as Andreas mentioned, some external requirement or coming from the internal organization or directly from the vendor, or sometimes the third party requirement as well. In the second step, we validate along with customer which the content of the source security framework, and we bring the relevant content or controls. And based on that, we come up with the target SAP security baseline, which is specific to the customer organization, covering all the aspect, covering your landscape, which we have already identified during the Know Your Landscape workshop. And then the next step is applying those guidelines or baseline or controls, whatever you would like to call them. But it's crucial that it's not just having this artifact or baseline, you should also push it to the down, and the system administrator should be applying this security baseline as well. But the next step is, I would say, the most crucial part of this process, monitoring. Yeah. This is the part where you ensure that we not simply applied this guideline or baseline, but we are staying compliant to that as well. So any kind of deviation, you are able to scan through your monitoring tool, and you can take the relevant action on any kind of deviation. Last but not least, the refinement. So as I mentioned earlier, it is not a one-time job which you need to do. You need to keep this baseline up to date all the time. We recommend to do this biannual, but it may vary from organization to organization. But the bottom line is we need to stay up to date with the security trends, because it will not be a one-time job. Always there will be new vulnerabilities will be exposed, and we need to bring all those updated information into our baseline as well. Recently, sharing my experience, I learned a new thing that it should not be a plain document, right? Your SAP security baseline. You really need to ensure the user experience aspect as well, because once you are circulating your baseline to the system administrator, they should be able to follow it. They should be able to apply easily what you want them to apply into their respective SAP landscape. So you really need to take care of user experience aspect as well when you are developing your SAP security baseline. In this slide, I try to present how it looks like when it comes to integrating your SAP landscape with the SIM environment. Here you can see we have a monitoring platform. So once you identify your crucial components in your SAP landscape, you need to consolidate the logs from each and every component into your monitoring platform. So these days there are many platforms available, and today we will also learn about SecurityBridge. But when we are having a conversation with a customer and helping them to evaluate the tools, we are going through a certain evaluation process. Yes, I try to put some crucial aspect. For example, the log collector, right? It should be effective and efficient. Yeah, it shouldn't create any bottleneck for your rest of the landscape, and it should flawlessly gather all the required logs, right? Then you should have a strong analytic engine. You should have a good reporting capabilities. But the most important is you should be able to apply your security baseline into this monitoring platform, because at the end of the day, that's the goal. How we see in the process, you would like to ensure that all of your systems are staying compliant with your baseline. So these two should be capable to apply or follow your organizational specific SAP security baseline. And of course, apart from that, there are other crucial aspects, for example, patch management, code vulnerability analyzer, or the interface monitoring. Yeah, what kind of data is inflowing, what kind of RFC calls are there, which APIs are being called, and so on. And this consolidated information can be pushed to the SIM environment, where it can be correlated with the information from other enterprise assets. Yeah, so you can consolidate the information from SAP landscape with the information coming from other assets, and you can be proactive in identifying the threat available in your organization related to security. And at the end, the incidents can be pushed to your central ITSM tool if there is something available, or if you are using the incident management capability of the SIEM environment, that's also possible. But the bottom line here is you first identify your crucial component, you come up with your security roadmap, you establish your baseline, and then you gather the logs from all the crucial components and consolidate it on the monitoring platform. So with this, I would like to now hand over to Ivan, who is going to show us a demo of the SecurityBridge, how this monitoring platform looks like. Thanks.
Yeah, and thank you, Goldie, for preparing such a smooth and very concise summary of how to deal with a baseline. Now, while I try to juggle with switching the presentation mode to an actual demo lab, now I would invite everyone during the session. I'm going to run you through an actual demo instance. Now, whenever you got a question, feel free to put your question into the chat. I'm more than happy to take this also, a bit ad hoc, a bit more dynamic. So also later on, as soon as we run through the demo, TJ, I will hand over back to you. And, let's please really concentrate on the topics that are being raised in the chat. Good. Meanwhile, everyone should see SecurityBridge. So SecurityBridge, and I will not go too much onto the product specifics, But it is important to state it is a solution that resides within SAP, so without extending the attack surface. It has the same look and feel. It embeds directly within your SAP environment, whether it's on-prem or cloud-based, that does not really matter. And it is a platform that applies a very holistic approach towards securing an SAP estate. It combines monitoring, hardening. We've already heard about, Accenture talking about patching, interface security. Now, all of those different elements, they are all individual activities of making your SAP system way more secure. Now, in order to get a bit of a view on the overall scope, now what you see here is a management dashboard. It is a summary that will consolidate monitoring all my systems. So we've already done that indexing of, which are the SAP systems that we actually run. And we can here see where are those SAP systems located. And, when we talk about baselining, we can directly see that, and we're connecting to a demo app, so this is not a real customer environment, of course, but we can, for instance, see authorization-wise, we are doing very bad when we compare ourselves against our target baseline. And this authorization concept is being applied across all the systems that we want to monitor. Also, interface security-wise, you've got a single, it's a central pane of glass that gives you a view on all the elements that you may need to actually improve your security posture. You can see how many nodes you're missing. You can see how many code vulnerabilities you have. When you got a SOX, so a Security Operations Center connected, you may have a quick view on which are the use cases that you're actually pushing from your SAP landscape directly into the SIEM solution. So this is just a bit of a dashboarding app that will give you that visual, that will give you that constant view on where you are in your journey. Now, but this is not where it starts. So if we go back to the gentleman before me talking about, index your landscape, this is exactly where it starts. And when we reflect that into SecurityBridge, since we are monitoring about every SAP application in existence, we can see in this demo landscape, we're currently monitoring about 26 different systems. And if we look at, what kind of systems are those, very often the majority of systems will still be ABAP-based systems, and there will be Java-based systems, but there will also be very technical components like SAP routers, like web dispatches, but also SaaS solutions. It is not said that, BTP, I've already heard people talking about it. BTP also has a very specific attack surface, and you would also need that constant monitoring. Now, what SecurityBridge does is, it does connect to all of those to your entire SAP estate, and it applies baseline and applies monitoring. It applies code monitoring. It, all the different elements that we've seen just before will be validated. And and I've heard Andreas talk about, helping to build up a baseline, because you need to know what eventually to validate. And SAP has done a tremendously good job. SAP did create that SAP security manual, that security template. It's a very complete, and it's an excellent document to start with. It will help you in a guided way on what is not secure by default. You can adjust. You can actually step by step improve that overall security posture. Now, the SAP security template is a great way to start, but there are many more sources. There is this ecosystem, like the SAP user groups, like the DSAG, and also the input that we jointly get from all our customers. We've actually translated that into, in this case now, a SecurityBridge standard baseline, which is a very, very complete baseline that deals both with hardening your system, but also applies to real-time monitoring of what is all happening in your system. Now, all of this entirely comes pre-configured, zero configuration effort. Clearly, you can always adjust and create your own controls, but that is once you go further on the maturity ladder. And so this is typically not where you get started. Now, once you have that baseline, you will have an instant access to all of the capabilities that you see on the first two lines. And I'm just going to randomly pick a few. We don't have an endless amount of time today, so I really kind of give you a bit of a sneak preview as to what all you may expect. Now, with a lot of customers, when you talk about baselining, and we've just configured, and we will go forward with the SecurityBridge standard baseline in this case. On the right-hand side, we will see all our systems, and clearly we're not only monitoring production systems, because if you would invite a pen tester to validate your security posture, black and white, they will not only look at your production system, they may look at a sandbox, they may look at the development system where the security posture is way less, it's less secure, because all of the SAP systems, they are very much interconnected. And in order to make a lateral movement in between systems of an SAP landscape is not always very complicated. Now, I'm going to take a bit of a random example. I'm going to click on, in this case now, it's just a development system. Now, as soon as I click on a system, you can see I'm validating against a security baseline from, in this case, SecurityBridge. But if I would say, take the one from the DSAG, from the German SAP user group, you will have way less controls, but it also makes it more digestible. So it is possible to run with multiple baselines at the same time. And I've seen a lot of organizations also working with a security framework. You may only have a certain interest into SOX controls, into the NIST framework, etc. So also the mapping between individual controls and what you enforce in your baseline can be, easily achieved using tooling like this. Now here we see we got a security rating of, I would guess, it's 30%, which is not very good. And we instantly see, going by the area of responsibility, in this case, authorization-wise, this box is not going very good. And we can see the same thing maybe for integration is also not, we can do way better. Now, why can we do way better? There is internal benchmarking. You can actually benchmark your systems against the best system in your own landscape. And, that has a bit of a gamification effect. You clearly, your system should not be the worst in class. And why do I say that? Is because security is a continuous activity. It needs continuous attention. It is not just a one-time thing, and for that you need to have a certain drive, and you need to clearly have a lot of teams working and cooperating all together. Now, depending on how you view this application, in this case I do have all the authorizations here, but more generally, more typically, you would have an authorization team working on this. You would have an SAP basis team working on this. You would have developers working on this in order to jointly actually raise that security posture. Now here we can see we have a bit of a flat line, means that we're not improving, but we're also not deteriorating. Now, just going by color code, everything that is red is not good and it would need attention. But I'm just going to call out two very basic examples so you've got a good understanding on how this process may work. Now I'm going to take the example, really a textbook example, the length of a password. It's something super, super easy, but in order to, implement that within a large landscape, it is not necessarily an easy thing to approach and to really get established. So we have a number of controls. So this is now a control that deals with, SAP logins. And, within one control, you will have a lot of subcontrols like password rule parameters, period parameters, how do you deal with generated passwords? So, by classification, and let's have a look on password rule parameters. Now we can see here, these are just plain SAP system parameters. We can see what is the current value of a parameter. We also know the SAP default value, and we also see the recommended value. Now, the recommended value is something that we derive from the baseline. So you can very quickly scan a system on, on thousands and thousands of parameters. And it's clearly, it's not only just parameters. We'll later see an example that deals with authorizations, but, the attack surface in SAP is actually quite large. You may have services that are exposed. You may have critical RFCs. You may have insecure ABAP programs. You may have missing security nodes. So, the attack surface is really massive, but you need to have a guided approach towards securing this. Now, SecurityBridge is clearly not only about the identification. That is still the relatively easy part. It is really that process on how can you, step by step, improve. And that is, in a basic example, minimum password length, in SAP standard, in this version of SAP, it says 6. Now, trust me, 6 is not very secure. This baseline apparently says 8. Now, trust me, 8 is not very secure. You would still have to go much longer, ideally not even use password, but let that be a very different conversation. As soon as you would see there is an issue, you can, now we take an approach by only monitoring one system, but with just a few clicks, you can get the results for all systems. But with every finding, you've got basically two options. Either you accept the risk and you document why you want to accept the risk, because you may have a mitigating control, maybe it's only temporary, you've got a project plan, get it documented. Make sure that you know exactly where you are, because you're going to be prepared for the auditor. Or in case you would like to get this addressed, get it addressed, address it using your existing change management process. If you have an integration with, you may use ServiceNow, you may use, a Jira tool. There's so many change management tools. SecurityBridge just, hand on hand, quickly integrates with all of them. But it's important, make sure it gets addressed. Now, if you would have superpowers like I have in this demo box, I would even have the option to directly change it here. And so it's always a guided procedure. You will always find a very clear risk description. If that is not enough, there is a button knowledge base. We have a wealthy knowledge base that talks about what is the best practice, how do you deal with things. Now, the second example I wanted to talk about, because it's also very textbook, a lot of people would know about it, that deals with authorizations. Now, if I click on authorizations, you can see there's a lengthy list of controls that we ship, but we'll only focus on the very first one. And the first one here says, this box has 232 users and 159 of them have critical authorizations. Now, what is critical? That's something that the tool will know. It comes out of the box, it knows exactly which roles, which authorization objects, not just roles, it's mainly the objects and the object values that will indicate whether a role or an authorization is critical. Now we can say, a vast majority of all users have critical rights. That's not in balance. And it's all about balances. Security can never be perfect, but you need to drive it to perfection. So you have to go through these results in order to understand, is that a risk that you can accept? Because maybe your basis resources, they need to have critical authorizations in order to do their job. They need to just manage the system. So this is, genuine access. But you need to spot check the things that, pollute. If you do an S4 conversion, what we see very often is that there's a lot of garbage left behind, things that have not been cleaned up because, you had to go live. You were under time pressure. Now, in this box, we can see 55 SAP Audit assignments. Again, textbook example, you see all the details, but you may very quickly be able to reduce your attack surface by locking users that have never logged on. Take away, shorten that attack surface. And again, super easy. You just mark those lines, accept the risk, create an incident, or instantly remediate and deprovision the users. Now, clearly, this is now just a one-time scan. Now, if we go down on the same screen, we can also see the trend because, the gentleman before me were also talking about, it is a journey. It is not just a one-time activity. And, you cannot boil the ocean at once. So you need to start, important, get started, know where you are, but then step-by-step improve. Now, what we see here is the green line is the number of users. That is in SAP quite typical. It will always go up. You don't delete users, you would lock users. Now, the orange line is actually the number of critical authorization assignments. And we see this goes up. And sometimes we even have a spike. Now, a spike may happen in case there is an authorization role that is assigned to a lot of resources, and all of a sudden there is an authorization object that moves into the role. So all of a sudden, a lot of people have rights they may not even be aware of, but the risk is there. Now, if we scroll even down a bit further, then we can actually see when was the last time one of the controls that we have has been violated. And I'll just read out a few examples here. We can say very high alert, there was an authorization cover-up because, and I'll just read the text here, there was the profile SAP role was assigned to a test user by a dialog user, and it was assigned for 14 minutes. Now, if you're familiar with the SAP data sources, you would already quickly understand there is a great amount of correlation that already happens. We're correlating about 20 different data sources in real time in order to validate that continuously with your own baseline. And as soon as we see something deviates from what we would expect, it generates an alert. Those alerts you can actually act on almost at machine speed. So there's an action framework, you can lock users, deprovision users, you can hyperlock users. There's an enormous amount of possibilities. Now, in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click it. As soon as I will click it, it opens our event monitor. And Goldie was also talking about integrating with a SOC. And this is such an example. The event that we see here, it's a singular event. It says there was an authorization cover-up by a dialog user for an X number of minutes, but it is already pre-correlated. Your security operations center, your security agents, they may not even be familiar with SAP. They can now directly consume such event in a human readable format with a very clear risk description, having the intelligence of what a very experienced SAP basis resource would be able to dig out with a lot of manual work. So important, start with a baseline, but instantly, and that's also what Andreas mentioned before, apply continuous monitoring. Make sure that you do not dilute again from your own baseline. Now, in all of those use cases that we've seen here, they all come entirely out of the box. There's nothing that you would need to do separately for this. There's a lot more intelligence. There is user behavior analytics. The tool would automatically learn what is normal and what is not normal in order for you to really help you to know where to get started, how to action. Now, if I zoom up a little bit, you would see there are a lot of controls, and a lot of these controls actually show red. Now, where do you start? And this is exactly where also Accenture can help you. They will guide you through, which are the most important elements to fix. Now, also tooling-wise, there is some capabilities. There is a roadmap. If I click here, imagine I want to harden this demo environment. Where do I start? The first thing you would have to do is, in this case, I'm only going to look at production systems. Let that be a good starting point. And if I now do a search, now it's going to compile a roadmap for me in order to harden this system. And we will always look at two important elements, and that is the exploitation risk combined with the resolution complexity. So that basically means, start fixing those things that are very easy to fix. And so a quick return on invest and making sure that you focus on the right stuff, quick wins. Now, we can directly see, authorization-wise. So there's a lot of issues dealing with authorizations. Now, imagine I have no interest in dealing with authorization because I'm a basis consultant, imagine. Then what I would do is I would only go into the area of responsibility and I would type in basis. So then I would only get those controls that deal with basis. So again, compile the roadmap, and it will then list me all the different basis styles that I can easily achieve. You can follow up those things, create a roadmap for this, and always make sure that you revalidate your system at very regular intervals, ideally continuously. And that is also what this platform is doing. Now, clearly, we've spoken about, hardening the system, but as you can see here on this Fiori Launchpad, there's actually a lot more to it. There is that real-time monitor that is your bridge into a security operations center. You also got your code security, and do not underestimate the amount of 0 days that we see within custom code. Custom code, this is also where we integrate quite a bit within SAP standard. We don't want to rebuild the wheel. It's very important, stick to SAP standard wherever possible. There is also the element of interface security. We monitor those IDOCs, we monitor those RFC, those OData calls. Clearly, incident management. It's not only about identifying single issues. No, it's really about following this up and getting things addressed in order to improve your security posture. Also, patching. Patching is probably one of those most important things. Now, every second Tuesday of the month, SAP, like any large vendor does, patch day. Now, what we do with SecurityBridge, we will make sure that you're looking at the right patches. And what is the right patch? That is a vulnerability that is relevant. That's a fix for a vulnerability that is also relevant for your system. So, you don't have to sift through knowing, what all is relevant. And, I'm just going to give you an example here. This box is running 6 hot news behind. So it's not really up to date. And we know black and white, those notes are really valuable. Now, how we combine that with a platform approach, this may be, your baseline may say you need to apply patches within a certain number of days. Now, what we do here is if a note would not yet be implemented, monitoring is going to be aware and it will anyway continuously monitor. There may be an exploit of something that has not yet been resolved. Now, Also, implementation-wise, there's an enormous amount of functionality within this platform. We can see, is there an impact if I would implement this node? Am I using those capabilities at all? Do I require testing? So all of these individual capabilities all together is what actually forms SecurityBridge. But maybe to really summarize, and TJ, I'm really going to hand over to you because I know I'm talking away all your time. Maybe it does make sense that we really look on, what was the essence of today's session here?
Okay, thank you, Ivan. Great demo. Can you move to the next slide?
I'm doing my utmost best. You are.
So that takes us to the key takeaways. I will not go one by one because we're a bit out of time, and also want to have the audience ask some questions. So understanding your landscape, I think that was pretty well summarized by Goldie. We went through defining an SAP security baseline with Andreas. Involving all stakeholders definitely is important. I guess collaborating with your auditor, they're not your enemy, and definitely work smart, consider tools to accelerate your security efforts. On request, you can get a copy of this presentation, so feel free to send an email to us if you need one. Okay, let's go to the Q&A area. I think there were a lot of good questions. First question, would you stick 100% to the SAP security baseline, or do most companies change some controls? Sounds like a question for Andreas to answer.
Yeah, let me answer it in a simple way. I would say yes, but of course there are somehow exceptions which need to be considered, because you can't switch on SNC if an connected system is not supporting it. So if you're just activating it, probably the business process will have an outage, and I think that's not what or I think that should be not your intention. So always try to judge, is it required or not? And if there is somehow a reason why you can exclude it, of course, you can do it.
Okay, thank you. And to add, right, I think most customers use the sub-security baseline as a starting point, but they do change it, right, to tailor it to their customer-specific requirements. Another question, does SecurityBridge also cover API or data services security?
I assume, TJ, that could be a question that I can answer. The answer is yes. So any data access that reaches an SAP system, whether it's through an RFC, whether it's to, a direct ABAP call, whether it's through an HTTP call or a REST call, consuming an API, would be validated. So we can see, who is calling certain endpoints, who is calling certain services, and SecurityBridge to that extent is also a bit self-learning. It's the biggest mistake that we see is security fatigue. If you have an enormous amount of events, where do you start looking? And you do need that intelligence to really understand, what's an anomaly. There's an enormous amount of critical functions, critical services, and critical APIs, but they may be needed for business purposes. So SecurityBridge is self-learning, and it will allow you to access them for standard business purposes. But if all of a sudden we see that users are being injected from a source or destination that we've never seen before, it's going to be a red light. And so it's really the exercise to really highlight, the anomalies in the haystack. Find that needle.
Okay, thank you. Let's take one more question. When talking about code security, does SecurityBridge also provide their own code scanning tool?
Absolutely, yes. I just take the freedom to also answer that question. So the code engine that SecurityBridge has is clearly it is, entirely built by SecurityBridge, but it does integrate with SAP standards. So what we see within SAP standard, if we've got developers on the line, I'm quite sure we have. SAP has standard tooling like Code Inspector, like the ABAP Test Cockpit, brilliant frameworks, and we actually also use them. We've developed this suite within SAP, so clearly we also use this. But what we see glaringly missing is security. So what we've done is the rule set that SecurityBridge has. It's a rule set that by the way, you can extend it. It actually complements SAP. So if you would have SecurityBridge installed, whether it's development or production, doesn't matter, every system would have it. You would actually see it's a small tick box within your Code Inspector or ATC variant that we need to activate. Now, where we do, slightly different than, the SAP standard coverage is, within SAP standard, it's a toolkit for developers to really harden their own source code. With SecurityBridge, we take that a bit step further, and we also use that for real-time monitoring. For instance, if you have a third-party transporter you would like to import, you probably want to validate the transport before you import. So, our code scanning could do this. If you have a transport in your import queue that is pending production import, we would validate it. If you got a code inject coming in, SecurityBridge would in real time actually scan your code. So even code security it is multi-dimensional. It's not just a static thing for developers, it's also that continuous, it needs to integrate within your threat detection. And sorry, that was a very long answer to a short question.
Thank you. Well, looking at the time, that brings us to the end of the webinar. We are definitely sorry that we could not answer all the questions, but I'm sure we will answer those questions offline. I would like to thank the presenters and of course all the attendees for joining this webinar. Have a great day and hopefully see you soon. Goodbye.
Cheers, everyone.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.